Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining today's advisor webinar. Depending on where you are joining us from, either good afternoon or good morning, or if you are listening to this on your own at some point later, maybe good evening. Appreciate you all taking some time out of your day today to think about how we can best support our Delta Upsilon chapters right now in this remote setting that we have found ourselves in. So appreciate you all being here. I know we had a good number who have signed up for today's webinar, but the challenges of those who may be working from home may also impact our live participation. Of course, this will be recorded and the recording will be placed on the advisor resources page of the DU website. So that should be up by tomorrow if you want to share with any of your fellow advisory board members. I feel like I know most of you, but I will do the introduction. I'm Michelle Marchand, our Senior Director of Chapter Development. I've been on staff with DU since about 2011. And it's been a pleasure to have one part of my responsibilities over the past few years to work with our advisors. And so I cannot start a webinar without thanking all of you for your adaptability over the last few weeks as we navigate this new environment, and how you have managed and supported our chapters and our undergraduates through this very different time period. So thank you for that. I am going to move us along here. If I can get my screen to forward. There we go. So a quick overview of our agenda for today's webinar. We have really 5 key areas and then a little bit of time at the end for any questions that might come in. There is a question box and a chat box on the side panel, so feel free to drop in questions as we go. I'll try to keep an eye on it if I can and answer them as they come up, but certainly we'll have time set aside at the end for questions as well. So here's our agenda. We're going to work our way through. I anticipate this might be about a 30-minute long webinar. I think the goal here is to provide you with a number of additional resources and ideas for right now. We know that this is a different situation than any of us would have expected for the end of the academic year. And so really, I think the goal is how can we find balance right now? How can we help our brothers and our undergraduate members find balance in all the different things that are coming at them? We know and we can't expect that the fraternity is going to continue exactly as it was earlier this year, but we do have to expect that the undergraduates do what they can with what they have during this challenging time and find a way to stay connected with each other, to keep the chapters going, to keep our colonies going, and to keep the fraternity as a whole going. And I think that's a key part of where our advisors and our alumni come in. So with that, I'm going to move us forward to our first overall topic, which is staying connected. One thing that I think we've talked about over the past 4 weeks now is the most important thing in this time period is how do we best prioritize brotherhood? It's about those connections. That's what we know at the core of the fraternity experience is those connections, are those relationships. And so how can we help chapters prioritize that brotherhood aspect? How do we acknowledge that this is going to look a little bit different for every chapter? There is certainly not one recommendation that we could put out there to say this is exactly what you should do and it's going to work for every chapter. So with that in mind, how can we step back and say that the most important piece here is to keep these men connected to each other, prioritize those relationships, those connections, and put in that effort. That's the most that we can ask. going along with that, and the prioritizing brotherhood piece is communicating the importance of that. And certainly we want to recognize there have been a number of advisory boards and alumni who have shared some of their communication with us over the past few weeks. I even just got a message this morning from the Syracuse alumni that they had shared with their alumni and with the undergraduates about some things that they have been doing. And so how can we help prioritize brotherhood through the methods of communication? So if it's sending out emails, if it's holding some Zoom calls, whatever it might be, communicating the importance of that brotherhood at its very core is really important. Staying connected through ongoing chapter colony meetings and executive board meetings. This is really something that we have a lot of our chapters who are doing this right now and have shared that it's been very helpful for them in just maintaining some consistency. You know, they know that like every Sunday night at 8 o'clock is our chapter meeting, or every Monday at 7 o'clock. And so whether they are on campus like they were earlier this year, or they are in their house at home, wherever they might be, they're still participating in the familiarity of that regularly scheduled chapter meeting, colony meeting, and executive board meeting if they're an officer. So as much as that schedule can continue, the more it's going to help the members in the chapter feel like they have something still going on with the fraternity. A lot of our chapters are using Zoom for that and have set up Zoom accounts to manage it. There's a free version of Zoom if you're not familiar with it, and then there's paid options as well, depending on the size of the chapter. I will put a warning out there for Zoom. Some of you may have participated last week in a Zoom discussion that we did, or you may have experienced this on your own. Be sure to lock down all of your Zoom meetings with passwords, authenticated users, a registration process. There's several different options in Zoom so that you don't end up with people joining those meetings who shouldn't be. So just a word of warning there. Other ways to stay connected. Just like we're challenging chapters to keep doing their meetings, also put that out there for advisory boards. If you already have a set schedule for your advisory board where you are meeting once a month or every 6 weeks, whatever it might be, stick to that as much as you can. You know, it's just as important for the advisors to stay connected, to talk to each other, to discuss what's going on campus, what's going on with the chapter. If you have a facility, that's a whole other bunch of issues that could be going on there with a chapter house. So certainly recommend that the advisory board stays connected as well. And then advisor and officer engagement. So most of our chapters that have more than one, more than two advisors have moved to the format of an advisor paired up with each executive board officer. And so this is a good time to just set up a check-in phone call or meeting, or again, Zoom or Skype or whatever it might be, to connect with that undergraduate officer that you work with. This can be just a check-in. It could be, depending on the position, they have a lot going on right now. It could also be a time to start forecasting for plans for the summer or looking ahead to the fall, which we'll get into some of those specifics in a little bit as well. And then the final piece on staying connected is being aware of our updates and changes that we have made to Men of Merit in the past couple of weeks. An email was sent out to all undergraduates, advisors, I think about 2.5 weeks ago, on changes that were made to the Men of Merit standards for this year. And so there were 5 of the standards that were updated. You can access all of that on the DU website, but I'll quickly mention CEP was changed. So the total points available for this year was reduced from 661 to 546. And then we revised criteria from both the spring section and the year-round points section. So depending on some of those criteria, you can go into the revised spreadsheet and see some of them are green color-coded because those can be done whether you are in person or remote. Some are color-coded as yellow because those could still happen just with some adaptation, or if you had something planned but it wasn't able to happen, you could still submit all of those plans to show that it was going to happen. And then finally, some are color-coded as red, which would mean this really isn't possible to happen now. However, if you did already do it this year, submit it, or if you had plans to do it, submit it. And those ones would basically be considered bonus points in the grand scheme of CEP. So it won't be holding anything against the chapters. That's why we reduce those total points available, but did still want to recognize if a chapter was able to do one of those things during the year, that they would still basically get bonus points for it. So take a look at the CEP changes and be sure to let myself or your staff liaison know if you have any questions on that. Also in changes for Metamerit, the program attendance standard was adjusted. So because of the cancellation of the May and June Global Service Initiative trips, and also dual, the Emerging Leaders Experience in June, we've reduced the attendance numbers for each of the aspiration, expectation, and minimum levels with program attendance. So aspiration was dropped from 15 members or 15% of the chapter to 12 and 12%. Expectation was dropped to 7 members, and then minimum was dropped to five members. So that should accommodate any chapters that had anticipated sending members to one of those GSI trips or sending members to dual. A note on the Leadership Institute, just a reminder that in terms of Metamerit calculations, attendance for the Leadership Institute is actually the start of the programming year. So looking at it from a July to June calendar, which means for this year's sake, the Leadership Institute in 2019 is what will be counted into the program attendance figures. The third Metamerit standard that was adjusted was around service. So again, lowering the average service hours for each of those areas. So for example, the expectation level for service was dropped down to an expectation of 15 hours of service per member per year. So that is from this entire academic year. Certainly if members are doing service right now still, I know that there have been a lot of resources put out around remote service, things that you can do to still help. That's great. They could certainly still do that, but wanted to accommodate chapters that just weren't able to get all their service done. So drop those numbers down. Also a note on service that when we say an average of 15 hours per member per year, that per member is calculated on their February 1st roster that was submitted to us. It wouldn't include any associate members that they took this spring. So those associate members, if they did service this spring, they can submit it and it would help the overall average, but they won't be used in the roster calculation for that average. So if you have questions on that, let me know. The fourth standard that was adjusted for Metamerit is philanthropy. So their global service initiatives, we decreased the numbers there. For aspiration, it's $1,000. For expectation, it's $500. And for minimum, it's $300. And then finally, learning assessment was also adjusted. And that was primarily for the membership outcomes survey in Greek Life EDU. The expectation was dropped down to 75%, and minimum was dropped to 60% of all members completing those. A note on Greek Life EDU, that's actually one of the easiest things for chapters to keep doing right now. So the expectation with Greek Life EDU is that every undergraduate member completes part 1 and part 2 of Greek Life EDU one time during their undergraduate membership. So the vast majority of our members will have done that during their associate member education period, but there always are a few stragglers that didn't get that done then. And so this is a great time period to get that done. We sent out updates last week and this week to chapter presidents with where the chapter is on their Greek Life EDU completion, and can certainly keep providing updates on that as well. All right, I'm going to move on to our next slide here. So opportunities for engagement. Thinking specifically about you as an advisor, how can you either stay engaged personally or act as a connection point for ongoing engagement for other people, either in the chapter or alumni? The first one, lead a discussion. So if you have an area of expertise or interest or hobby, whatever it might be, this is a great way to, again, keep the guys connected. So if you want to talk about some career advice, if you are an expert in real estate or how to buy a house someday, or investment 101, whatever it might be, this can be a cool opportunity to put that offer out to the chapter of, hey, next Thursday at 7 o'clock, I'm going to hop on Zoom. If you are interested in learning about investing someday, come join this Zoom call for 30 minutes and treat it as just an opportunity to share your knowledge with the undergraduates when they might have a little bit more flex time. Similar to that, who do you know, whether it might be other chapter alumni, campus staff members, faculty members, whoever it might be, that could also provide some sort of knowledge sharing for the chapter? This is also a great time. We have a couple of chapters who have good examples of alumni mentoring programs where they match up alumni with undergrads to mentor them, give them career guidance, things like that. This could be a great time to kickstart that, particularly with our graduating seniors who we know are struggling even more right now. Speaking of seniors, this is an unprecedented time for our seniors, and want to be able to pay some special attention to them. We know that they are missing out on a lot of those closure activities to their undergraduate career. So how can we still provide that recognition, that send off to them, even if it might be different? I know of a couple of chapters that are going to do a senior night on Zoom. So each senior will get a chance to do their final speech to the chapter. They maybe can't physically give some of their things away, but they can on the screen, and then give them out once the travel bans and stay-at-home orders are lifted. But that at least opportunity to say their thank yous, say their goodbyes. Other examples, we have some chapters who have done like the senior superlatives on social media, different tags and tributes there. We also sent an email out from the fraternity last week to anyone in our database that is a freshman, sophomore, or junior, and all of our advisors, that we are putting together a overall DU video saying thank you to seniors. So if that is something you would be willing to participate in, you can send us a short video of yourself. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. You can do it on your phone and send it over to social media at deltau.org, and we will be sending that out later this spring. Additional opportunities. So utilizing some of those smaller connections that exist within the chapter, encouraging big and little brothers or other one-on-one opportunities. I know of some chapters that every week at their chapter meeting, they assign two brothers to go on a bro date or something similar during the week. You could still do that. So it's just going to have to take place virtually somehow. It could be something like, there's ways that they can play video games together from different locations. They could watch a movie from different locations together. Studying, they could cook together while they're on FaceTime. There's a whole lot of different ways that they could stay connected in those smaller relationships as well. One good idea here is to provide some sort of prize or reward for the guys that do that. So say you set it up at this week's chapter meeting. A week from now, anybody that did participate, they can tell you what they did, and each of those pairs would, get their names put into a hat, and a couple get some gift cards or something like that, just to recognize that they're making that attempt. They're trying to stay connected with each other. And then I'd also put a plug in for campus programs, just like we are over at DU's headquarters. Campuses are trying to figure out how to do this as well. And so they've moved a lot of their programs and speakers and different events into virtual formats. So take a look at what's being offered on your specific campus and see how you can get the chapter connected there and feel like they're still part of that campus community as well. All right. Moving forward, so I mentioned this briefly at the beginning, but wanted to talk a little bit about how advisors can help some of the specific officers. Recruitment. So what the next few months are going to look like is certainly unknown for all of us. Are especially chapters that traditionally do summer recruitment, those who do recruitment first thing in the fall. There's a good chance that that could look different this year. So if you are working with the chapter's vice president of recruitment, setting up that meeting to talk through schedule and plans, what can they do now even more so to utilize the networks that they already have, build those names list of incoming first year students, who do they know, who are they connected to, as much of that work that can be done now, the more prepared they're going to be come summer and come early fall, when we might have to adapt and pivot again based on what's happening on campuses. DU is also going to be offering some additional help with recruitment that I'll mention in the next slide. Finances, certainly on everybody's mind right now, and so how can advisors help the VP Finance to adapt that budget for fall? I know of a couple chapters that are building out different budgets for fall. So based on their anticipated current membership, based on another one based on if they see a reduction in membership, and then a different one if they also have a house and how housing could be impacted by that as well. So just like recruitment, as much forecasting and planning that could happen now, it's going to better prepare the chapter going into fall with finances. I'll mention this at the end, but there won't be any fee increases coming from the fraternity for the fall. So that's good, and that they can already anticipate that the numbers we have set on the website in terms of member fee, chapter fee, associate member fee, all of those are staying the same. They're not increasing in any way. VP Academics. So if you are working with a VP Academics, I think one of the easiest pieces here is everybody's now taking classes online. There may be some guys in the chapter who have taken classes online in the past. and already are used to that model, whereas others are doing it for the very first time. So how do you utilize the knowledge and experience of those that have successfully completed online classes? How can they share those tips and ideas and suggestions with the rest of the chapter? I know there are some campuses that have switched their grading styles for this term, so more pass-fail options instead of actual grades, and the potential impact for GPA could look a little different this term. So thinking through those things, encouraging the men to finish their term strong, but also thinking about recognition opportunities. So you know, recognizing, we're used to recognizing things like highest GPA, most improved GPA, but who else could we recognize right now for academics? You know, what about those guys who have had their programs completely change? There are some majors that it's a lot easier to go to an online format, but there are some who have had to change, you know, they're in labs all the time, or they're having clinical assignments or hands-on observations that just aren't happening now. So how can we also provide some extra recognition to those guys for their ability to adapt to those different situations and move forward as best as they can? External relations, philanthropy and service obviously look different right now. I know a shout out to our Michigan chapter, who they, I think every spring, do a fundraiser for St. Baldrick's, and they shave their head as part of it. They actually did it on Zoom a couple of days ago and ended up raising a lot of money for it still. So appreciate the creativity that is still coming out to be able to do some philanthropy things, to be able to do some service events. You know, some of the service stuff that you can do right now in certain areas of the country, there's blood shortages, so popping out to give some blood in your community if you can. Things like cleaning up litter on the streets. There's also a number of online service opportunities, and we've shared some of those on the DU website that you can connect into, helping to tutor kids, helping to translate pieces if you have experience with a different language. So there certainly still are opportunities there. Also, under external relations, how you are staying engaged with your alumni, keep sending out those updates and emails and staying active on social media. We've even heard from a couple chapters that are still doing social events, but it is taking place, again, on Zoom. So a chapter that was supposed to have a mixer with a sorority decided, hey, we can't do it, so what if we all just got on Zoom on Tuesday night and, you know, played a game together instead? Might sound a little funny or cheesy, but it's still an opportunity for some human connection despite being on screens instead of in person. Member education, a big one here. If you currently still have associate members, you can absolutely 100% continue that associate member education process. We've also put resources on that on the DU website. Just last Friday, our chapter at Elon down in North Carolina did a virtual initiation, and it was really cool. Obviously not the same as being in person, but I was able to call in and see everybody on Zoom, and they went through Rite 1 and Rite 2 of the initiation ceremony. Instead of signing the roll book, which they will all do when they get back to campus, they opened up a Google document and everybody signed that. So there was still that element of making it official in writing. They still had a charge speaker. One of our Mena Merit Committee members from another chapter was their charge speaker. So it was really cool that they had that opportunity. And then when they get back to campus in the fall, they will still, you know, make it a celebratory type of event to actually physically give them the ribbon with their badge on it and sign the roll book in person. But it was nice to see that. And if you are interested, your chapter is interested in doing that, we have, like I said, resources on the website, best practices for how to do a virtual initiation. And by best practices, I mean, this is new to all of us. So certainly we'll take ideas and add them in as that happens as well. Loss prevention, I already mentioned this, but one thing that a VP loss prevention could be working on right now is that Greek Life EDU component. So checking in on members on how, if they've completed it, if they've completed part 1 and part 2. The deadline for those is to complete part 1 by the end of April and part 2 by May 15th. So certainly still some time to get that done. And then VP loss prevention could also be a great person to just do some individual check-ins with members. How are they doing? You know, their well-being, mental health, especially those who might be alone or, you know, quarantined or staying at home with, you know, not a lot of other people, or maybe in a challenging environment. And that VPLP can be the person to lead that. And then finally, for the Vice President of Administration, if you're working with him, just got an email from an undergraduate at our Maryland chapter the other day saying, hey, we're going to take some time to make sure every member of our chapter has updated their bio cards with the fraternity. So their current address, current contact information, all of that. Great. That's a good thing to do. Also making sure VP admin is sending out meeting minutes and updates to the chapter, maintaining their calendar of events, things that they have going on. All right, want to take a couple of minutes just to mention some of the Delta Upsilon programming that we're putting out from fraternity headquarters as well. Virtual education series. So we started it last week with that Zoom discussion webinar on friendship, promoting friendship and remotely, and how that ties into some mental health pieces as well. More information is going to come out tomorrow, but next week we will be having a recruitment webinar on Tuesday night, the 14th, and then on Thursday, the 16th, a webinar on academic support, specifically for undergraduates. And then several more that are scheduled over the next few weeks of April and into early May. I think it's important to point out too that we know that the education series, it's not going to be all end all for everybody and for every chapter. And so there's not a requirement or an expectation for chapters to participate in these, but wanting to have the opportunities available so that those who do think, well, I think we're pretty good with Brotherhood, I don't need to hop onto that one, but actually the academic support one sounds like something we could use, I am going to join that. So trying to have as many opportunities available to hopefully connect with all the chapters that want and need to be connected right now. Getting a little bit more into recruitment specifically. So coming out tomorrow to all VP recruitment, chapter president, recruitment advisors, will be information about some of the additional recruitment resources that we have put together. Like I said, there'll be a recruitment webinar next Tuesday. There'll also be a sign-up form available for chapters that want to schedule one-on-one coaching specific to recruitment, and then putting additional resources out there for our chapters that primarily do summer recruitment, our chapters that have struggled with recruitment in the past few years and need some additional assistance. Coming a little bit further into the spring, some recruitment opportunities based upon your type of campus. So if you are on a large campus, large houses, maybe a formal recruitment process, we'll have some specific recruitment coaching and resources available there, compared to campuses that might have deferred recruitment, you know, not until spring 2021, those who have a completely open recruitment where you could just be doing recruitment anytime that you want, all those different pieces, there's going to be different programs and resources available over the next few weeks to make sure we're providing as much support as we can in this unknown, unprecedented time. How many times can you say that phrase, right? Additionally, last week we did President's Academy follow-ups. So when chapter presidents attend President's Academy in January, they are put into a small group that they stay with throughout that weekend, usually about 8 to 10 of them in a small group, and typically grouped with similar type chapters or similar challenges in those chapters. So last week we did follow-up Zoom calls with those different small groups, and the facilitators also participated in those as well. So we're looking, we got a lot of great feedback from the members that participated in those, and looking to provide another opportunity down the road for that connection piece as well. And then finally, one other piece to look forward to in the next few weeks. Some of you who have attended Leadership Institute in the past may be familiar with this. There's two different pieces that usually happen at the Leadership Institute. One would be executive talks. So for example, let's say we had a high-level CEO that's receiving one of our award of merits at the Leadership Institute. He might do an educational session during LI where guys can, ask him questions, hear about who he is, his career path, things he's learned. We're going to take that concept and move it virtually as well. So again, just another education networking type of opportunity for members. And then the other piece that we do at LI, the Ignite series, which you may have seen videos on our YouTube channels. At LI in person, it takes the form of 10 minutes up on stage, no notes, just some slides, tell your story, share your area of interest or whatever it might be, that we've had both alumni and undergraduates present on. So we're going to take that concept and also move that to a virtual format as well. Probably won't be as long as 10 minutes, might be shorter, 4 or 5 minute quick videos that you'll be able to record on your own that you can share with us and that we will then put out there. So for you all, I know there's some really awesome people on this call right now that have fascinating stories, interest areas, whatever it might be. If you would be willing to share one of those topics of interest, of expertise, whatever it might be, in a 4 or 5, 6 minute video, look for more information coming soon. And then finally, wanting to just point out some additional resources that are available. We continue to update the Delta Upsilon website. There's the advisor resources page, which you're probably all familiar with, where we keep our webinar recordings and different resources for advisors. We've also kept adding ones on the undergraduate or chapter resources page as well. So look for new pieces there. If you are on the main deltau.org website, you will see pretty immediately on that page a link to our COVID-19 coronavirus webpage, which has a number of different resources, all of the communications the fraternity has sent out so far, some specifics related to finances and house corporations and things that we have learned from the stimulus program that the government passed, all those pieces, passing along as much information as we can to you all. I would also recommend checking out the NIC, that's the North American Interfraternity Conference. They've convened a fraternal think tank that has done a number of discussions over the past few weeks with experts from across different industries. So they interviewed an infectious disease specialist about specifically COVID-19. There's one that is out there right now where they talk to some housing management companies and kitchen management, food providers for fraternity houses to talk about things that people should be doing if they are in those management type roles for chapter houses. But if you go to the NIC website, it's nicfraternity.org, or you go to the NIC Facebook page, you can see all of those video discussion recordings there, as well as a number of other resources that they are compiling to provide to everyone. And then also just a note on house corporations, there's a lot of different situations right now, depending on who owns the house, how it's managed, how large it is. So we've put some information that we've been able to on the DU website, and also look for some additional information there coming soon as well. Happy to try to direct folks in as best direction as we can right now with some of those different, because there are so many different situations for each house corporation based on what's going on in that city and states and region of the country, whatever it might be for that. And then also, we'll just make a note on finances too. I know that that question has come up a little bit, just to clarify that, again, the fraternity has suspended any finance charges and late fees since March, and that will continue through the term. So if you're familiar, the fraternity does billings twice a year, September 15th and February 1st for member fee, chapter fee, and the loss prevention insurance. Any billing that is done outside of those two dates is connected to associate member reporting, initiate reporting, and then also if they attended educational programs and needed to be billed for a registration afterwards. So there shouldn't be any further billings right now unless a chapter has to report their initiates still or something like that, but no further billings that will come from the fraternity until the fall, until that first September 15th deadline. With that, I will say, if you do have any questions, if you haven't dropped them in the question box or the chat box yet, go ahead and drop them there. Our liaison structure at the headquarters has been very helpful for the staff over the past few weeks, and hopefully it has been for you all and for the chapter officers that you work with. We find that having those relationships in advance of something like this happening has been very helpful. I know that there are a couple other headquarters that don't have that liaison format, and so they rushed in the last 3 weeks to say, you know, this staff member is now paired up with this chapter and this staff member is with that chapter, and that's great. But I think the wonderful thing for us is we have already established those relationships since last summer with who your liaison is, and so it's been helpful on our end, and we hope that it has been on yours as well, that you know a direct contact at headquarters that you can connect with. I will also say that I think just one reminder for our undergrads especially, because when things happen like this, you know, it can feel like it's the end of the world. Everything that we know has changed in just a 3 or 4 week period. Reminding them as much as we can that there have been many challenges in the history of Delta Upsilon, and that the fraternity has overcome them, whether it have been previous pandemics, world wars, recessions, you name it. And DU has overcome those and will overcome those again. And so giving that support and giving that encouragement when needed. Got a question here about a final decision on the Leadership Institute. I don't know an exact date when the decision will be made on the Leadership Institute. I know that it's something the board of directors has been discussing in conjunction with the hotel in Orlando and current guidelines and orders and things like that for the state of Florida. So I think that I hope that there will be a decision made in the next few weeks. And as soon as that is made, it will be communicated to everyone as well. Typically the registration deadline for LI is about June 15th, and then with an opportunity to cancel your registration up until 2 weeks prior to LI. So plenty of time in that regards, but we know that people are thinking about this and starting to see some other fraternities and sororities who are either canceling their summer conventions or moving them to some sort of a virtual format. So as that information becomes available, we will make sure you all know as soon as possible. All right, well, I am not seeing any other questions. I will always put that out there that anything you need, anything we can do from the fraternity side to support you all, please reach out and let us know. I can't say thank you enough, but thank you for all of your support and work and helping our undergraduates navigate this, and also to you all. I know that you are also dealing with many challenges right now as well. So thank you for taking the time to be here to listen to this webinar, and hope to see you all and talk to you all soon. Have a great day. Thank you very much.